I'd been watching the heat bloom across O'Hare's Terminal 2 for 11 years. Every shift, same thing. Aircraft engines cooling from white hot to red to nothing. Baggage carts leaving brief trails of warmth. Maintenance crews moving through the pre-dawn dark in orange and yellow smears. The thermal imaging systems didn't lie. Metal cooled at predictable rates. Bodies radiated at 98.6 degrees. Equipment left signatures I could read without thinking. 11 years of night shifts teaches you the language of heat. You learn which tug driver takes the long route past Terminal 5, which gate always has a faulty jetway seal leaking warm air, which section of tarmac holds the day's heat longest after sunset. I knew it all. Could have run diagnostics blindfolded. Made decent money, too. Not great, but steady. Health insurance. 2 weeks vacation I never took because what was I going to do? Sleep during daylight instead of dark? The missing fingers on my left hand didn't matter much when you spent your whole shift at a desk. Frostbite took them 4 years back during a sensor repair I should have left for the day crew. Learned that lesson. 3:47 in the morning, February. Dead zone between the last red-eyes landing and the first business departures. Terminal 2 sat quiet on my screens. Just the overnight cleaning crews and a few gate agents prepping for the 5 a.m. pushes. Then the readings went wrong. Not wrong like a malfunction, wrong like physics had stopped working. Gate F8 showed a thermal signature, human-shaped, bright orange against the cold blue concrete of the jetway. I'd seen 1,000 people walk through that door. Seen them pull it open, step through, let it swing shut behind them. Seen the heat transfer from their hands to the metal handle, watched the doors seal, compress, and release. This figure walked straight through without opening it. The thermal bloom rippled. That's the only word for it. The solid matter of the door disturbed the heat signature the way water ripples when you drag your hand through it. And the figure kept moving, kept walking, passed through 6 inches of reinforced steel and safety glass without slowing down. My hands were already moving to the diagnostics panel. Muscle memory from 11 years of sensor glitches and calibration drift. Had to be a malfunction. Software error, maybe. Interference from the new radar installation they'd been testing over at Terminal 3. But my stomach had gone tight. That clench you get when something's not right. When the world's showing you something that doesn't fit. The figure stopped moving. Stood in the center of F8's waiting area, facing the runway window. Just stood there, motionless, burning orange on my screen. I ran the full diagnostic sequence. Takes 90 seconds to cycle through every sensor in Terminal 2, check calibration values, verify temperature gradients, confirm system integrity. Longest 90 seconds of my life, watching that figure stand there while the progress bar crawled across my monitor. Every system came back green. Normal function, no errors, no interference. Calibration within 0.02 degrees of baseline. The equipment was working fine. My hand shook when I reached for the security camera toggle. Just a tremor, barely visible, but I felt it. Felt that fundamental wrongness spreading from my gut to my chest. I pulled up camera 17, which covered F8's waiting area from the ceiling mount near the bathrooms. High-definition color feed, upgraded 6 months ago. Could read a boarding pass from 40 feet away on those cameras. Empty corridor. Locked gate door. Rows of blue plastic seats with nobody in them. I switched to camera 19, jetway angle. Nothing. Just the sealed door and the darkened walkway beyond. Camera 15 wide shot from the concourse. Not a person in sight. The floor gleamed under the fluorescent lights, fresh from the cleaning crew that had passed through 20 minutes earlier. But on the thermal display, the figure stood exactly where it had stopped, dead center of the waiting area. Hadn't moved, hadn't shifted weight. Just stood there facing the window, burning bright against the cool blues and purples of the empty terminal. I had both feeds up now, side by side on my monitors. Left screen showed the thermal imaging, that impossible orange silhouette standing in perfect clarity. Right screen showed camera 17's color feed, empty chairs and polished floor, and absolutely nothing else. Same location. Same angle. Same moment in time. My brain kept trying to reconcile it. Kept searching for the explanation that would make both images true. Calibration error, I thought. But the diagnostics had just cleared. Camera malfunction. But I could see the waiting area perfectly. Every detail sharp. Timing delay. But the system clocks were synced. Had been synced for 11 years without drifting more than a millisecond. The figure didn't move. Didn't turn. Didn't fade. I stared at my screens, at the impossible contradiction burning across my monitors, and couldn't make it make sense. Human-shaped thermal signature standing in an empty room. Heat without a source. A person who existed on one system and not the other. The tightness in my stomach had spread to my throat. 11 years I'd been watching these screens. 11 years of predictable patterns and understood systems and heat signatures that followed the rules of physics. Bodies were warm. Concrete was cold. Doors opened when you pushed them. Not anymore. I called Torres. Didn't go through proper channels. Didn't file a report through the system or wait until morning to send an incident summary. Just picked up the desk phone and dialed his mobile, watching that orange figure stand motionless on my thermal display while the security camera showed empty space. He answered on the fourth ring, voice thick with sleep. "This better be good, Bowers. I need you to come in. It's 4 in the goddamn morning." I know what time it is. My right hand was still gripping the phone too hard, knuckles going white. There's something on the thermal feed that shouldn't be there. Silence on the other end. Then a sigh that rattled through the speaker. "Run diagnostics." Already did. Full sequence. Everything's clean. Then it's equipment malfunction. File a maintenance request and... Torres. I cut him off, which I'd never done in 11 years. "You need to see this." Another pause. Longer this time. Maybe he heard something in my voice that didn't belong there either. 20 minutes, he said, and hung up. I spent those 20 minutes watching the figure. It didn't move, didn't shift weight or turn its head or give any indication it was anything except a statue made of body heat. The thermal signature stayed consistent, bright orange core with yellow edges, temperature reading holding steady at 98.4 degrees. Human normal, except there was no human there. Torres arrived in 19 minutes. I heard him coming down the corridor before I saw him, heavy footsteps moving faster than his usual morning pace, keys jangling against his belt. He pushed through the monitoring room door, already talking. "This is highly irregular, Bowers. I've got a 6:30 meeting with facilities management, and if you dragged me out of bed for a calibration error..." He stopped when he saw my face. Then his eyes went to the monitors. "Left screen," I said. "Thermal imaging. Gate F8. Right screen. Security camera 17. Same location." Torres moved closer, squinting at the displays. I watched his expression shift from annoyance to confusion to something else entirely. The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might collapse. Went from that ruddy complexion he always had to pale gray in the space of 3 seconds. Jesus Christ. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "Diagnostics came back clean," I said. 90-second full sequence, no errors, no interference, calibration's perfect. Cameras are synchronized, that's the same location at the same moment. Torres didn't answer, just stood there staring at the screens, one hand gripping the edge of my desk. His knuckles matched mine for color. "How long has it been there?" I checked the log timestamp. 43 minutes. Appeared at 3:51. Walked straight through the gate door without opening it. Stopped in the center of the waiting area. Hasn't moved since. Through the door. "Yeah." He pulled out his phone. Didn't ask permission. Didn't explain what he was doing. Just stepped back from my desk and started dialing. The first call lasted maybe 30 seconds. Torres spoke in clipped sentences I couldn't fully decipher. Fragments about Terminal 2 and thermal anomalies and immediate response. His voice had that tight quality people get when they're trying to stay calm and failing. He hung up. Dialed again immediately. The second call was even shorter. Just confirmation of details, location specifications, current status. Torres kept glancing at my monitors while he talked, watching that motionless orange figure. Third call was the longest. Torres turned away from me for this one, dropped his voice lower. I caught pieces. Authorization codes, security protocols, containment procedures. Words that didn't belong in a conversation about malfunctioning equipment. When he finally hung up, he didn't look at me. Just kept staring at the thermal display. "What's happening?" I asked. "Can't discuss it?" "Torres." "I said I can't discuss it." He turned then, met my eyes. "You stay at this station. Monitor all feeds. Document everything you see. Timestamps, locations, duration. Don't talk to anyone about this. Understood?" "No, I don't understand. What the hell is—" "Bowers." His tone went flat. "Official. Those are direct orders. Follow them." He left without another word. The door clicked shut behind him, and I was alone again with my monitors and that impossible figure standing in an empty gate. The unmarked vehicles started arriving 47 minutes later. I watched them on the exterior cameras. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows, no government plates, no identification markings. They pulled up to Terminal 2's service entrance where deliveries usually came through. Men in dark suits climbed out, moved with purpose toward the building. Within the hour, Terminal 2 was cordoned off. They did it quietly. No announcements, no alarm, just a systematic rerouting of the handful of early passengers, gate agents making apologetic noises about technical difficulties. The official story came through on my monitor's text feed at 5:38. Gas leak detected in Terminal 2. Immediate evacuation for safety inspection. Passengers redirected to Terminal 1 for all departures. There was no gas leak. I knew because I was watching the thermal imaging for the entire terminal, and a gas leak would show temperature variations, concentration patterns, dispersion across ventilation systems. The only thermal anomaly in Terminal 2 was still standing motionless at Gate F8. Except by the second night, it wasn't the only one anymore. They multiplied. First one appeared at 5:43 a.m., 18 hours after the initial figure. Gate F12, same pattern. Walked through the locked door, stopped in the waiting area, faced the window. Temperature signature identical to the first. Second new one showed up at Gate F3 around 7:15 that evening. Then another at F16 just after midnight. By the second night, I'd counted 17 distinct thermal signatures. They moved through the terminal without regard for physical barriers. I watched them pass through walls. The heat signature would compress slightly as it met the concrete, then ripple and continue through to the other side. Saw one descend straight down through the floor between F9 and F10, temperature reading steady the whole way, disappearing into the level below. They made no sound. I'd pulled up the audio feeds for every location where the figures appeared, cranked the sensitivity to maximum. Nothing. Not footsteps, not breathing, not the rustle of clothing or the creak of joints. Just silence while those orange shapes drifted through spaces that should have stopped them. Security cameras never caught them. I must have checked 40 different angles, cross-referenced every thermal signature with visual feeds. Empty space, every single time. The cameras showed Terminal 2 exactly as it should be. Vacant gates, empty corridors, static furniture. The thermal imaging showed 17 people who weren't there. They spread outward from Terminal 2 like an infection. Started concentrated around the F gates, then gradually expanded. By the end of the second night, I had signatures in Terminal 1's B concourse, 2 in the maintenance tunnels beneath the runways, 1 that appeared briefly in the parking structure before vanishing entirely. I mapped their movements, documented every appearance and disappearance, tracked duration and temperature and trajectory. Built a log that ran 37 pages by the time my shift ended on night 2. And I noticed the pattern with the cold spots. Maintenance crews were still working Terminal 2 despite the evacuation, hazmat suits and detection equipment playing their parts in the gas leak theater. I watched them on the cameras, saw them pause in certain locations, saw the confusion in their body language. Turned out wherever the figures stopped for more than 10 minutes, those spots went ice cold. I mean cold enough to hurt, cold enough to form frost. Caught the first one on camera at Gate F8, same place the original figure had stood motionless for 43 minutes before I'd called Torres. Maintenance guy in a hazmat suit walked through, stopped, crouched down. Even through the camera, I could see his breath condensing. He pulled off his glove, touched the floor, yanked his hand back fast. They brought a temperature gun after that, started checking every location where I reported a figure had paused. Gate F8, 41 degrees, frost crystallizing in a perfect circle 6 feet in diameter. Gate F12 waiting area, 38 degrees, ice forming on the armrests of 3 plastic chairs. Corridor between F14 and F16, 34 degrees, condensation freezing on the concrete walls. These were interior spaces, climate controlled. Should have been holding steady at 72 degrees. I reported each discovery to Torres. Called him every time a new signature appeared, every time the pattern shifted, every time maintenance found another frozen spot. He'd set up some kind of command station in Terminal 2's administrative offices, and his voice got tighter with each update. New signature, Gate B7, I'd say. Logged. Duration? Appeared at 03:15, still present. Temperature 98.6. Movement pattern? Came through the north wall, proceeded directly to the window, stopped facing runway 27 left. A pause. Keyboard sounds. Noted. Anything else? Maintenance found another cold spot at F3, 29 degrees, ice on the floor. His breathing would change then. Sharper. How thick? 1/4 inch, maybe. Hard to tell from the camera angle. Documented. Keep monitoring. He'd hang up. I'd go back to my screens. By the 4th day, Torres looked 10 years older. The few times I saw him on the security feeds, he was moving differently. Shoulders tight, head down, phone always pressed to his ear. His face had gone beyond pale to gray, exhaustion carving lines I'd never noticed before. Each time I called with an update, his voice carried more tension, less patience. The clipped sentences got shorter. 3 new signatures in Terminal 1, I reported on night 4. Where? Not even a question, just a demand. Gates B4, B9, and B12 all appeared within 20 minutes of each other. Pattern? Same as Terminal 2, walked through barriers, stopped at windows, facing runways. Silence. Then, total count? I looked at my log. 31 distinct signatures observed, 17 currently active. Currently active, he repeated it flat, dead, meaning the others disappeared. Yes. Average duration is 4 hours, 23 minutes before they vanish. No pattern to the disappearances. They just drop off thermal suddenly. No fade, no movement. Gone. More silence. I heard voices in the background on his end, urgent tones I couldn't make out. Bowers. His voice dropped lower. The cold spots. How many now? I'd been tracking those separately. Had a whole section of my log dedicated to temperature anomalies and frost patterns. 46 confirmed locations. Temperatures ranging from 42 degrees down to 23. Frost depth up to 1/2 inch in the oldest spots. And Torres... What? They're not warming up. Maintenance checked F8 again this morning. Still 41 degrees. It's been 4 days. He didn't respond for a long time. Just breathing on the other end of the line. Keep documenting, he finally said. Report any changes immediately. What's happening here? I can't... You keep saying that. But I'm watching this spread, watching these things multiply, and nobody's telling me what the hell I'm actually monitoring. Your job is to monitor and report, that's all. My job is thermal imaging systems, and these readings don't make any goddamn sense. Heat signatures without bodies, temperatures that violate basic thermodynamics, frost forming in climate-controlled. Bowers. Sharp enough to cut. Document and report. Nothing else. Clear? I wanted to push back. Wanted to demand explanations I'd earned after 4 days of tracking impossible phenomena, but his voice carried something new now. Not just tension or exhaustion, fear. Clear, I said. He hung up without another word, and I went back to my monitors where 31 thermal signatures haunted an airport that couldn't see them. She walked into my monitoring station at 2:17 a.m. on the third night. No knock, no warning from Torres. Just the door opening and a woman in a dark gray suit stepping through, credentials already in her hand. Federal Aviation Administration. The name read Bailey Pierce, and beneath that a single word, specialist. Specialist in what? The credentials didn't say. Mr. Bowers. She didn't make it a question. Her voice carried that East Coast clip, words trimmed neat at the edges. I need to see your thermal feeds. I'd been alone in this room for 53 hours except for Torres's brief visits. The sudden presence of another person felt wrong. Intrusive. She smelled different than the stale air I'd been breathing, something clean and sharp, maybe mint or eucalyptus. Professional. Deliberate. Torres send you? Mr. Torres contacted the appropriate authorities when the situation exceeded his operational parameters. She moved toward my monitors without waiting for permission, her dark eyes already scanning the displays. I'm the appropriate authority. She was maybe 5.5 feet tall, but she moved through the space with the kind of certainty that made height irrelevant. Athletic build. Hair pulled back so tight it had to hurt. A small scar cut through her left eyebrow, pale against olive skin. I watched her study the feeds, 17 thermal signatures currently active across Terminals 1 and 2. The figure at Gate F8 had been standing there for 6 hours and 43 minutes. Temperature in that waiting area had dropped to 39 degrees. Frost climbed the window glass in crystalline patterns. Pierce's expression didn't change. You're not surprised, I said. No. She pulled a tablet from her briefcase, fingers moving across the screen. Her nails were cut short. Practical. She photographed each of my monitors in sequence, the camera shutter clicking soft in the quiet room. What are they? I'll explain. She set the tablet aside, then leaned closer to the thermal display showing Gate F8. But first, I need to confirm what you've documented. The figures pass through solid barriers? Doors, walls, floors. Movement patterns? Walk to a location, stop, stand motionless. Average duration 4 hours and 23 minutes. Then they disappear. No fade. Just gone. Temperature drops at stationary positions? Every location where a figure stands for more than 10 minutes, cold spots don't recover. F8 has been at 39 degrees for 4 days. Pierce nodded once, crisp and economical. She straightened, crossing her arms. The motion pulled her jacket tight across her shoulders. You've done thorough work. I waited. My hands rested on the desk, the scarred left one next to the intact right. The fluorescent lights hummed their constant tone above us. She didn't speak. You said you'd explain. I did. She moved to the chair Torres usually occupied during his visits, sat with perfect posture. What you're seeing, Mr. Bowers, is a manifestation of threshold density. The words meant nothing to me. Technical terms from a field I didn't know existed. Threshold density, she continued, occurs when intense human emotions accumulate in a specific location over an extended period. The emotions, grief, terror, anticipation, desperation, joy, they have weight. Not physical weight, but something measurable nonetheless. When enough emotional intensity concentrates in one place, it wears reality thin. I stared at her. She spoke the way I'd describe a calibration sequence. Clinical, precise, matter of fact. That's not possible. You're looking at 17 thermal signatures that walk through walls. Possibility has already been redefined. Fair point. She gestured toward the monitors. Airports are particularly vulnerable to threshold density accumulation. Consider what happens here. People say goodbye to dying parents, knowing they won't see them alive again. Soldiers deploy to combat zones. Families reunite after years of separation. Business travelers miss their children's birthdays over and over, that quiet grief compounding, every gate, every security checkpoint, every arrival corridor. They're saturated with emotional extremes. The room felt smaller. I'd worked in this terminal for 11 years. 11 years of watching people through cameras and thermal sensors, seeing them reduced to heat signatures and movement patterns. I'd never thought about what they felt. O'Hare processes over 83 million passengers annually, Pierce said. It's been operating since 1945. Conservative estimates put total passenger count over 1 billion. A billion people experiencing some of the most intense emotions of their lives, all concentrated in this single location. Her tablet screen glowed blue in her lap. She glanced at it, then back to me. That concentration creates holes, Mr. Bowers, gaps in what should remain solid. My stomach tightened, the same sensation I'd felt watching that first figure walk through the gate door at F8, that fundamental wrongness of physics breaking down. The figures, I said. What are they? Not ghosts. She said it quickly, cutting off the question before I could fully form it. That's a common misconception. These aren't spirits or souls or consciousness persisting after death. They're echoes, impressions. When someone experiences an emotion powerful enough, in a location where threshold density has worn reality thin, part of that moment leaves a mark. An imprint of their presence, their movement, their heat signature. I looked at the monitor showing gate F8. The orange figure stood motionless, facing the runway window. Had been standing there for 6 hours and 47 minutes now. What were they feeling? I don't know. Could have been anything. Terror of flying, grief at leaving someone, joy at going home. The specific emotion matters less than its intensity. Pierce leaned forward slightly. Most threshold locations accumulate dozens or hundreds of these impressions. They exist in a kind of dormancy. Harmless, invisible. Your thermal sensors wouldn't normally detect them. But something changed. Yes. The word hung between us. I waited for her to continue, but she'd gone quiet. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The first crack in that clinical composure. What changed? She stood, moved back to the monitors. Her fingers didn't touch the screens, but they hovered close, tracing the outline of the figure at gate F12. They became aware. The fluorescent hum seemed louder. I could hear the ventilation system pushing air through the ducts above us, that constant whisper of circulation. Aware of what? That they're being watched. Pierce turned to face me. Her eyes were dark and absolutely steady. Emotional echoes exist in a passive state. They're recordings, essentially. Patterns of energy repeating without consciousness or volition. But when observation focuses on them with sufficient intensity, when someone sees them and tries to understand them, that attention creates a feedback loop. The echoes begin to respond. My mouth had gone dry. I thought about the past 4 nights, watching these figures appear and disappear, documenting every movement, every temperature reading, staring at them for hours, trying to understand what they were. I did this! You made them visible, yes. Your thermal imaging system provided the observation mechanism. Your attention sustained it. She paused. But the underlying condition, the threshold density, was already present. This was inevitable. If not you, then eventually, someone else. Small comfort. I looked at the 17 orange figures on my screens. 17 echoes that hadn't been conscious before I started watching them. What happens now? Pierce didn't answer immediately. She returned to her briefcase, extracted a different device, smaller than the tablet. It had a screen and what looked like a sensor array on one end. Now, she said, we determine how aware they've become. She activated the device. The screen showed readings I didn't recognize, wavelengths or frequencies, numbers shifting in real time as she moved the sensor across the room. Electromagnetic field measurements, she said, reading my confusion. Emotional echoes generate specific EM signatures when they transition from passive to aware states. Background levels in a standard airport terminal run between 0.3 and 0.7 milligauss. She aimed the sensor at my primary monitor, the one displaying gate F8. The numbers jumped, spiked to 12.4. That's not background, I said. No. Pierce moved the sensor in a slow arc across all 6 monitors. The readings climbed higher with each screen. 15.8, 19.2. At the monitor showing gate F16, the numbers hit 23.6. They know you're watching right now. They're oriented toward your observation. I pulled my hands off the desk. Irrational response. The figures were in the terminal, not here in my monitoring station. But the idea that they could feel my attention, that they were somehow looking back through the cameras and sensors. My skin prickled cold. Pierce lowered the device. The thermal signatures you're seeing aren't random appearances. They're responses. Each time you document a new figure, each time you focus your systems on a specific location, you're feeding energy into the feedback loop. The echoes are becoming more solid, more present. The temperature drops. Yes, as they solidify, they pull heat from their environment. Basic thermodynamics. Energy can't be created or destroyed, only transferred. They're taking ambient thermal energy and converting it into physical presence. She set the EM reader on my desk. The cold spots will continue spreading. The figures will appear more frequently. And eventually... She stopped. Eventually what? Pierce met my eyes. For the first time since she'd walked into my monitoring station, I saw something other than clinical detachment in her expression. Not quite fear. Something more complicated. Resignation, maybe. Or exhaustion. Eventually they'll be solid enough to interact with physical matter, she said. Not just walk through doors, open them, move objects, touch people. The ventilation system whispered above us. On my monitors, 17 orange figures stood motionless in their respective locations. Gate F8, Gate F12, Gate F3, Terminal 1's B concourse, the maintenance tunnel beneath concourse E. 1 billion passengers, 1 billion moments of intense emotion. All those impressions, all those echoes, waiting dormant in the threshold density until someone looked at them long enough to wake them up. You need to stop watching, Pierce said quietly. I almost laughed. Would have if my throat hadn't been so tight. That's my job. 11 years I've been monitoring these systems. I know, but continued observation will accelerate their manifestation. We need to reduce the feedback loop while we determine containment protocols. Containment. I turned the word over. You've dealt with this before. Twice. Philadelphia International, terminal renovations in 2016. Denver, concourse expansion 2019. She picked up her tablet again. Both situations resolved before the echoes achieved full physical presence, but both required complete observation blackout for a minimum of 72 hours. 72 hours. 3 days of not watching my monitors, not checking the thermal feeds, not documenting the figures' movements and patterns. 3 days of not doing the only thing Torres had ordered me to do. He told me to monitor everything, document with timestamps, report every development. Mr. Torres doesn't understand what he's dealing with, Pierce said. His background is airport operations and security protocols. He's applying conventional crisis management to an unconventional situation. The more you document, the worse this becomes. I looked at my screens. The figure at gate F8 had been standing there for 6 hours and 51 minutes now. I knew its exact temperature, 98.4 degrees. I knew the cold spot beneath it had expanded to 7 feet in diameter. I knew frost had formed on the window glass in a pattern that resembled breath condensation, even though the echo didn't breathe. I knew all of this because I'd been watching, constantly, for 4 days. "They're aware I'm watching right now," I said. "Yes." "Can they see me?" Pierce hesitated. That pause told me more than her words would. "We don't know the full extent of their perception, but yes, we believe they have some form of awareness directed toward their observer, not sight as you'd define it, something more fundamental. They know where attention is coming from." The cold feeling spread from my skin inward. I thought about sitting here for 4 nights staring at these figures, and them staring back, feeling me watch them, growing more solid with every hour of my observation. 17 of them now, 17 sets of awareness, all oriented toward this room, toward me. "What do I tell Torres?" "Nothing. I'll handle Mr. Torres." Pierce closed her briefcase with 2 sharp clicks. "My authorization supersedes his operational authority in situations involving threshold phenomena. As of now, you're reassigned to my supervision." She said it with absolute certainty. No room for negotiation or question. I should have felt relieved. Should have been grateful someone was taking control. Someone who understood what these things were and how to stop them. Instead, I felt the way I had 4 years ago when the frostbite took my fingers. That sensation of something fundamental being removed, leaving only absence behind. "How long have you known about threshold density?" I asked. "The FAA has been documenting unusual phenomena at major airports since 1963. My department was formalized in 1998. 25 years. A quarter-century of watching airports accumulate emotional weight until reality wore thin enough for echoes to push through. How many locations? 47 airports worldwide show measurable threshold density. 18 are actively monitored." She moved toward the door. "O'Hare has the highest concentration we've recorded. It was only a matter of time before something triggered a manifestation event." Something. She meant me. My thermal imaging systems, my 11 years of watching, my 4 nights of intense observation focused directly on the echoes. I'd triggered this. Pierce opened the door, then paused. "Get some rest, Mr. Bowers. Real rest, away from these monitors. I'll begin implementing observation reduction protocols immediately." "And the figures?" "Without sustained attention feeding the feedback loop, they should begin to fade. Return to dormancy within 72 to 96 hours. She glanced back at the monitors one last time. "Assuming we've caught this early enough." She left. The door closed with a soft click. I sat alone in my monitoring station, surrounded by screens showing 17 thermal signatures that knew I was watching them. The EM reader Pierce had left behind sat on my desk. Its screen dark now, but the numbers still vivid in my memory. 23.6 milligauss at gate F16. Background levels ran 0.3 to 0.7. I looked at the figure at F8, still motionless, still facing the runway window. The frost on the glass had spread further while Pierce and I talked, climbing toward the ceiling in delicate crystalline branches. Some part of a person had stood in that exact spot, feeling something so powerful that the moment left a mark reality couldn't erase. And now that mark was aware, conscious, looking back at me through the barrier between what should exist and what shouldn't. I didn't turn off my monitors. Not yet. I'd been staring at the monitors when the movement caught my eye. Not movement exactly, the opposite of it. Every orange figure on the thermal screens had gone still at the same instant. The one at F8 had been stationary for nearly 7 hours, but the others had been drifting, slow walking patterns through corridors and gates. Now they'd all stopped. 17 thermal signatures frozen mid-step or mid-turn. Then they moved again, all at once, They rotated. Each figure turned in place, their orange silhouettes pivoting on the thermal displays until they faced the same direction, not toward the runways or the concourse windows or the departure boards, toward me. Ice slid down my spine, vertebra by vertebra. I could feel each inch of the cold as it spread. The monitoring station sat in Terminal 2's northeast corner, third floor, administrative level. I'd worked from this exact desk for 11 years. The figures were scattered across 2 terminals, some on ground level, others on the second floor concourses. Different distances, different angles, different buildings, but every single one faced directly toward this room, toward the monitors, toward my chair. I pushed back from the desk. The casters squeaked against the floor mat. Dr. Pierce. She'd been studying her tablet, the electromagnetic reader still in her other hand. Her head came up fast. "What is it?" I pointed at the left monitor. Terminal 2's thermal overlay showed 9 signatures. Every orange form oriented in the same direction, bodies angled toward the camera's position. "They've all turned around." Pierce moved to the desk. She set the tablet down, leaned close to the screens. Her finger traced across the display, checking angles, calculating sight lines. "Terminal 1-2, I said. The right monitor showed 8 more signatures, same pattern, all facing the monitoring station's location despite being in a different building 300 yards away. Pierce's jaw tightened. The clinical detachment I'd seen for the past 40 minutes drained from her expression, replaced by something harder, more immediate. "When?" "Just now, maybe 30 seconds ago." She pulled her phone from her jacket pocket, typed something fast with her thumbs. The screen's glow reflected off her glasses. "This changes the timeline," she said. Not to me, just out loud. "What timeline?" Pierce didn't answer. She finished typing, put the phone away, then turned to face me fully. "I need you to enter Terminal 2. I blinked. "What?" "The thermal cameras aren't providing sufficient data. We need direct observation with calibrated equipment." She gestured toward a black case I hadn't noticed earlier, sitting on the floor beside the door. "Portable monitoring stations. You'll place them at 3 locations among the figures. Gate F8, the F14, F16 corridor, and Gate F12. My mouth had gone dry. "You want me to walk up to those things?" "Yes." The ones that just all turned to look at me. "The thermal cameras can't capture the full electromagnetic spectrum. We need readings from multiple wavelengths to understand their manifestation density." Her voice had shifted. Still professional, still measured, but faster now, clipped at the edges. "You know the terminal layout. You've been monitoring these figures for 4 nights. You can navigate the shortest routes and identify optimal placement positions." I stood up, backed away from the desk until my shoulders hit the wall. "No, Mr. Bowers, absolutely not. You said they're aware now. You said they know I'm watching. You want me to walk right up to them?" Pierce's expression didn't change. She reached into her other jacket pocket and pulled out her phone again. Different motion this time. Deliberate, not rushed. She unlocked it, swiped through several screens, then held it out toward me. "Look at this." I didn't move. She stepped closer, arm extended, the phone screen angled so I could see. The photograph showed a hospital room. White walls, monitoring equipment, IV stands, a person in the bed. Couldn't tell if it was a man or woman. Their skin had gone gray, mottled with dark patches that looked like severe frostbite. The kind I'd seen on my own hand 4 years ago, right before they'd amputated 3 fingers. But this wasn't fingers. The discoloration covered the person's chest, their neck, spread across their cheek and jaw. "Denver International," Pierce said. "November 2019. 63-year-old male passenger walking to gate C38. He passed through one of the manifestations, walked directly through its position without seeing it." She swiped to the next photo. Different person, similar damage. younger, maybe 30s. The frostbite covered their abdomen, dark tissue visible through a hospital gown. Same location, 2 days later. 47-year-old female passenger. Gate C41. Another swipe. This time, the photograph showed a covered body on a gurney. Medical examiner's tag, visible on the sheet. We lost 7 people in Denver before we implemented the terminal closure. Internal organ frostbite. Their lungs, hearts, and major blood vessels froze from the inside when they occupied the same physical space as an active manifestation. My stomach clenched. The tightness from earlier returned, spreading up into my throat. Pierce swiped again. New location, different terminal architecture, different hospital, more bodies, more gray-black tissue damage. Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta, March 2020. We caught it earlier there, shut down Concourse E within 72 hours of first manifestation. Still lost 12 people. She lowered the phone but didn't put it away. The figures in Denver and Atlanta followed the same pattern you're seeing here. Appeared on thermal imaging, created cold spots, remained stationary for hours before disappearing. But the manifestation density increased each night. By night 6 in Denver, they'd become solid enough to affect physical matter. By night 7, passengers could walk through them. You said the observation blackout would make them fade. In Denver and Atlanta, we implemented blackouts after they'd already achieved partial physical presence. The feedback loop had progressed too far. Pierce's voice carried an edge now, sharp enough to cut. Here, we caught it earlier, night 4 instead of night 6. But they've already demonstrated awareness by orienting toward your observation point. That's a night 5 indicator. She pulled up another photograph. This one showed a thermal imaging display, similar to mine. Dozens of orange figures crowded across the screen, packed into corridors and gate areas. O'Hare processes an average of 210,000 passengers per day. Peak travel days exceed 270,000. It's the nation's second busiest airport and the Midwest's primary hub. Pierce swiped to a different image, a departure board showing dozens of cities, hundreds of flight numbers. If these manifestations reach active terminals during operational hours, and passengers begin moving through them without seeing them, we're not looking at 7 deaths or 12 deaths. She met my eyes. We're looking at thousands. The monitoring station's climate control hummed in the silence. 68 degrees, same as always, but I felt cold spreading through my chest. The portable monitors will give us manifestation density readings, Pierce continued. Electromagnetic spectrum analysis across 7 wavelengths, real-time data on their solidification progress. With that information, we can calculate whether an observation blackout will still work or whether we need to implement more aggressive containment protocols. What kind of protocols? That depends on what the data shows. She picked up the black case, set it on my desk. But we can't make that determination without direct observation equipment in position. I looked at the monitors. 17 orange figures, all facing my direction. The one at F8 had been standing there for 7 hours and 9 minutes now. Frost covered the window glass behind it in the security camera feed, temperature reading at 38 degrees in a space that should be 72. My left hand throbbed. Phantom sensation from fingers that weren't there anymore. I'd lost them to frostbite 4 years ago, repairing a malfunctioning sensor in sub-zero wind chill. Knew exactly what frozen tissue felt like, how the cold burned before the numbness set in. Those people in the photographs, they'd walked through the figures and frozen from the inside out. Lungs, hearts, blood vessels turned to ice. 210,000 passengers per day. Peak travel days over 270,000. I thought about morning departures, the crush of travelers heading to security checkpoints, business commuters and family vacations and college students going home. Thought about those orange figures standing motionless in active gate areas, invisible to everyone except thermal imaging. Thought about thousands of people walking through them one after another, not seeing anything wrong until the cold started spreading through their chests. My hand went to my jacket pocket, found my keys, felt the familiar weight of the key ring, the small flashlight I kept attached. How long will it take? My voice came out rougher than I'd intended. Equipment placement should take approximately 20 minutes. 3 locations, calibration at each position. And you'll have the data you need? Yes. I looked at the monitors again. F8, F12, the F14, F16 corridor. Routes I'd watched on these screens for 11 years. Knew every camera angle, every sight line, every door access point. Knew exactly where those 17 figures were standing. Waiting. The ice in my spine had spread to my shoulders, my arms. But my hands had gone steady. I understood I had no choice. Show me the equipment. I pushed through the service door into Terminal 2 at 2 a.m. exactly, carrying Pierce's black equipment case in my right hand. The latch clicked behind me with a sound that echoed too long down the empty corridor. The case weighed maybe 15 pounds. 3 devices inside, each about the size of a hardcover book, wrapped in foam padding that smelled like fresh plastic and electronics. Pierce had shown me the activation sequence upstairs. Press the recessed button twice. Wait for the green indicator light. Set it on a flat surface within 10 feet of the manifestation's last recorded position. Simple enough that I'd almost believed I could do it without my stomach trying to crawl up through my throat. You're in Terminal 2, North Service entrance, Pierce said through the earpiece she'd fitted into my right ear before I left the monitoring station. Her voice came through clear and close, no static. Proceed down the corridor to the main concourse. I'll guide you to F8 first. I started walking. The corridor stretched ahead under emergency lighting that turned everything the color of old bruises. My footsteps sounded wrong. Too loud, then too quiet, then loud again as I passed under the ceiling vents. Copy, I said. Felt stupid saying it, but she'd told me to confirm every instruction, so she knew the connection stayed clear. The air felt normal temperature. 70, maybe 72. Standard climate control for the administrative corridors. I shifted the case to my left hand, careful with my grip since I only had thumb and index finger on that side. The handle pressed into the scarred tissue where my other 3 fingers used to be. 20 feet down the corridor, the temperature dropped, not gradually. Just dropped, the way it does when you open a freezer door in summer. One step, I was comfortable in my uniform polo. The next step, my breath puffed out, visible in front of my face. Temperature change, I said. Corridors getting cold. Expected, Pierce said. You're approaching areas with active manifestations. The thermal draw extends beyond the figure's immediate positions. Keep moving. I kept moving. The case felt heavier. My left hand started aching where the frostbite damage went deep into the tissue. Old nerve endings that never quite healed right responding to the cold. 4 years since I'd lost those fingers, and I still felt phantom pain. When the temperature dropped, still felt fingers that weren't there anymore trying to curl against the chill. The corridor opened onto the main concourse. F gates stretched ahead in both directions. Dark storefronts and closed restaurants and empty seating areas under the overhead lights that stayed on all night. No cleaning crews now. Terminal had been cleared after Pierce arrived. Some story about equipment inspections that required full evacuation of non-essential personnel. Just me, and 17 thermal signatures that knew I was watching. My breath fogged thicker. The temperature had dropped again, maybe down to 50 now, cold enough that I wished I'd grabbed my jacket from the monitoring station. But Pierce had said move quickly, establish the monitoring stations before the manifestations could respond to my presence in the terminal itself instead of just observing from the cameras. Turn left, Pierce said. F8 is 40 meters ahead, past the closed coffee shop. I turned left. The equipment case banged against my leg with each step. The concourse stretched empty and silent except for my footsteps and my breathing, both sounds too loud in the stillness. The cold kept getting worse. Not a steady decline, but in waves, like walking through curtains of freezing air. One step would be 50 degrees, the next would be 40, then back to 50, then down to what felt like 30. My skin prickled. My breath came out in thick clouds that hung in the air too long before dissipating. I passed the coffee shop, chairs stacked on tables, metal gate pulled down and locked. The window glass had frost on it. Not condensation, actual frost, the kind that forms patterns and crystals. In a climate-controlled terminal that should never drop below 68 degrees. "Approaching F8, I said. My voice sounded thin. "Stop at the seating area," Pierce said. The initial manifestation appeared at grid coordinates matching the third row of seats from the gate door. Center position. I stopped at the seating area. Blue plastic chairs bolted to metal frames, arranged in rows facing the gate windows. Beyond the glass, the runway lights stretched out into the February darkness, red and white markers blinking their steady patterns. The temperature at F8 felt like standing in a walk-in freezer. Had to be 35, maybe lower. My fingers went numb. My ears started aching. Each breath burned cold in my throat and lungs. I set down the equipment case and opened it. The three devices sat in their foam padding, matte black rectangles with recessed buttons and small LED panels. I pulled out the first one. The metal felt warm compared to the air around me. "First device ready," I said. "Activate it, then place it on the floor beneath the seat where the manifestation was recorded," Pierce said. "The sensors need to be within 10 feet of the position for accurate density readings." I pressed the recessed button twice, waited. The LED panel lit up green, then started cycling through colors. Green to yellow to orange to red, then back to green. Some kind of calibration sequence, probably. I knelt down and slid the device under the third row of seats, center position, right where the first thermal signature had stood motionless for hours while frost climbed the window glass. The cold came up from the floor like it was alive, like kneeling on ice. My knees went numb immediately through my work pants. The phantom pain in my left hand spiked sharp enough that I gasped. "Device placed," I managed. "Confirmed," Pierce said. "I'm receiving data. Stand up and move away from the immediate position. Proceed to the second location." I stood up fast. My knees protested, that specific ache you get from kneeling on frozen concrete. I grabbed the equipment case and backed away from F8's seating area, watching the device's LED panel continue its color cycle under the seats. Nothing visible, just empty chairs and polished floor and that device blinking its rainbow sequence. But my thermal scanner, the wrist-mounted unit Pierce had given me upstairs, strapped over my right forearm like some kind of medical brace, showed an orange figure standing exactly where I'd just placed the device. Human-shaped, human temperature, motionless. I couldn't see it, couldn't hear it, but the scanner showed it clear as anything, bright orange against the blue-cold background of the terminal. "Moving to second location," I said. Had to force the words out. My throat felt tight. "Restroom corridor between F14 and F16, Pierce said. "Proceed down the concourse, past F12. You'll see the corridor marked with standard restroom signage." I proceeded down the concourse. The scanner on my wrist showed more orange figures now. One at F12 standing in the middle of the seating area. Two at F16 positioned near the gate door. Another in the corridor between F9 and F10 facing the window. The temperature kept dropping. Had to be below freezing now in some sections. My breath came out in thick white clouds. My exposed skin, face, neck, ears felt raw and burning with the cold. I walked faster, trying to generate body heat, trying to get this done and get back to the monitoring station, where it was warm and I was separated from the manifestations by cameras and distance. The restroom corridor appeared on my left. Standard signage, blue and white symbols for men's and women's facilities. The entrance to the corridor was dark, emergency lighting only, and frost covered the walls in thick white sheets. My scanner showed 5 orange figures in that corridor. 5. All standing motionless, all human-shaped, all clustered near the restroom entrances like they were waiting in line. "Second location reached," I said. "Scanner shows 5 manifestations present." "Expected," Pierce said, but her voice had tension in it now. "That corridor has the highest concentration in Terminal 2. The emotional resonance near restrooms is particularly strong. Anxiety, illness, desperation. Place the device as close to the center of the cluster as you can manage." I stared into the dark corridor. The frost on the walls glittered under the emergency lights. My scanner showed those 5 orange figures, perfectly still, arranged in a loose grouping about 15 feet down the corridor. I didn't want to walk between them. "Ronnie," Pierce said, "the device needs to be placed in the center of manifestation clusters for accurate density readings. I need that data to determine if observation blackout will still work." I thought about the photographs she'd shown me. Passengers in Denver and Atlanta who'd walked through manifestations after they'd reached full density. Internal frostbite. Organs frozen from the inside. 7 dead in Denver. 12 in Atlanta. Thousands of passengers every day at O'Hare if this reached the active terminals. I walked into the corridor. The cold hit me like a wall. Like walking into a meat locker. Like the night I'd repaired that sensor on the roof in January and the temperature had been 12 below and the wind chill had been worse, and I'd lost 3 fingers because I'd stayed too long trying to get the calibration right. This was colder. My breath froze in my throat. My eyes watered and the tears felt like they'd freeze on my cheeks. Every inch of exposed skin screamed with the cold. I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. Couldn't feel my ears. Couldn't feel my nose. The scanner showed the orange figures all around me. 1 to my left, 3 feet away. 2 ahead, blocking the corridor. 1 to my right, so close the outline almost touched my shoulder. 1 directly ahead, 5 feet away, standing between me and where I needed to place the device. I couldn't see them. Just the dark corridor and the frost-covered walls and my breath hanging in clouds so thick I could barely see through them. But I felt them. Pressure against my skin, against my whole body, like standing in deep water. Like the air itself had weight and substance and was pushing against me from all directions. I opened the equipment case with shaking hands, pulled out the second device. The metal felt hot against my numb fingers. I pressed the button twice, watched the LED cycle to green, then pushed forward through that invisible pressure toward the center of the corridor. The pressure increased. Not gradually. With each step it got heavier, denser, like the water was getting deeper. My ears popped. My chest felt compressed. Breathing took effort. I knelt down in the center of the corridor. Between the 5 orange figures my scanner showed surrounding me, and placed the device on the floor. The cold came up through the tile like electricity. My knees, my shins, my thighs went numb instantly. The phantom pain in my left hand went supernova, nerves that didn't exist anymore screaming with remembered agony. I tried to stand up. The pressure held me down. Not physically. Nothing touched me. Nothing grabbed me. But the weight of it, the density of whatever these things were, pressed down on my shoulders and back and head, like gravity had tripled. "Device placed," I said. The words came out slurred. My jaw was numb. "Confirmed," Pierce said. Her voice sounded distant now, thin through the earpiece. "Ronnie, move out of the corridor. The density readings are higher than projected. You need to exit that space." I tried to stand. My legs didn't respond right. The cold had gone too deep. Muscles not firing correctly. Nerves shutting down. I got 1 foot under me, then the other. Pushed myself up with my right hand braced against the wall. The frost on the wall soaked into my palm. Cold beyond cold. Cold that burned. I staggered out of the corridor back into the main concourse. The temperature there felt tropical by comparison. even though it couldn't have been above 40. I bent over, hands on my knees, trying to breathe, trying to get warm blood back into my extremities. "Third location," Pierce said. "Can you continue?" I looked at my left hand. The 2 remaining fingers had gone white, bloodless, the same color they'd been 4 years ago, right before the frostbite set in permanently. "Where?" I said. "Gate F3, northern end of the concourse. The manifestation there is isolated, not part of a cluster. It should be less intense." "Should be." I grabbed the equipment case and started walking north. My legs felt distant and clumsy. My left hand had no sensation at all anymore. The scanner on my right wrist showed orange figures throughout the terminal now, at F8 behind me, in the restroom corridor, at F12, at F16, scattered through the concourse in positions that matched the patterns I'd been tracking for 4 nights from the safety of my monitoring station. Gate F3 sat at the far end of the terminal. I walked past empty gates and closed shops and seating areas covered in frost. The temperature fluctuated with each section: 40 degrees, 30, 50, 25. My body couldn't regulate anymore. I was just cold, uniformly cold, cold all the way through. F3's seating area appeared ahead. The scanner showed one orange figure standing near the gate window. Just one. Isolated, less intense. I approached the seating area, pulled out the 3rd device, pressed the button twice. Green light, color cycle, ready to deploy. The figure on my scanner stood motionless near the window. I walked toward it, device in my right hand, watching the orange outline on the small screen. 10 feet away, 8 feet, 6 feet. "Positioning 3rd device," I said. The scanner flickered. Not the normal color cycle. A glitch. A disruption. The screen went dark, then lit up again, and the orange figure that had been 6 feet away was now inches from my face. I saw it, not on the scanner, with my eyes. Direct visual contact. A woman, middle-aged, business suit. Face twisted in an expression of grief so profound it didn't look human anymore. Eyes that weren't eyes, just dark voids where eyes should be. Mouth open in a scream I couldn't hear. Her hand reached toward my face. The cold hit me like a physical blow. Not the gradual chill of the terminal, not the freezer cold of the restroom corridor. This was absolute zero. This was the cold of deep space. This was cold that stopped molecular motion. My vision whited out. Not darkness, white. Pure white, blinding white. Every nerve in my body fired at once and then went silent. I felt myself falling but couldn't feel the floor when I hit it. Vision came back in pieces, white ceiling tiles first, then the pattern of black speckles across them, fluorescent lights in metal fixtures, the polished floor 6 inches from my face, reflecting those lights in streaky lines. Frost coated my eyelashes. I could feel the weight of it, tiny crystals pulling at the skin around my eyes each time I blinked. My breath came out in white clouds that dissipated against the cold floor. Pierce's voice screamed through the earpiece so loud it distorted into static bursts. "Responding? Ronnie, can you hear me? Ronnie!" I tried to answer. My jaw wouldn't move right. The muscles felt frozen, locked in position. The word came out slurred, my tongue thick and clumsy. "Here." The screaming stopped. Pierce's breathing filled the earpiece, rapid and harsh. "Don't move. Stay exactly where you are. Help is coming." I was sprawled on my stomach, left arm extended in front of me, right arm tucked beneath my chest. The equipment case lay on its side 3 feet away, lid open, empty. I'd placed all 3 devices. Completed the mission before the woman's face appeared inches from mine. My stomach lurched. I turned my head to the side and dry heaved, nothing coming up but bile that burned my throat. "Ronnie?" Pierce's voice had shifted to something careful, controlled. "Can you move your extremities?" I flexed my right hand. Fingers responded, curling against the floor. Moved my right foot. Toes wiggled inside my boot. Tried my left hand. Nothing. I focused on it, sent the signal from my brain down my arm to curl those fingers. The phantom sensation was there. That feeling you get when you know your hand should be moving. The neural pathway firing. But no actual movement. No feedback. No pressure against the floor. Ronnie. Can't feel my left hand. My voice sounded steadier now, the muscles warming up enough to form words properly. Nothing. It's just gone. Pierce didn't respond immediately. The silence stretched for 3 seconds. 4. 5. Help is 90 seconds away, she said finally. Don't try to move it. Don't look at it. Just stay still. But I'd already turned my head, already shifted my gaze down to where my left arm extended across the terminal floor. The hand was black. Not the healthy pink-brown of living flesh. Not even the pale white of my usual complexion after 11 years of night shifts. Black. Deep, absolute black. The color of charcoal or ash or things left too long in fire. No, not fire. The opposite. The black started at my fingertips and spread back across my palm, up past my wrist to disappear beneath my sleeve. Frost covered the entire surface, tiny ice crystals glittering under the fluorescent lights. The skin looked hard, rigid, like stone or frozen meat. I'd seen frostbite before. 4 years ago, when I'd spent too long outside repairing that sensor, I'd watched my fingers turn white, then red, then purple. The doctors had explained the progression to me afterward, shown me diagrams of how tissue dies when ice crystals form inside cells and rupture them from within. This was beyond that. This was tissue that had hit temperatures cold enough to kill cells instantly, temperatures that shouldn't exist in climate-controlled terminal space. Absolute zero, I thought. That moment when she reached for my face and everything stopped. Footsteps pounded down the concourse. Multiple sets, running hard. I closed my eyes and pressed my forehead against the cold floor. Tried not to think about the black hand extended in front of me. Tried not to remember the woman's face, those void, dark eyes, that silent scream. The phantom pain started then, sharp and bright and impossible, firing from fingers that had already died. The doctors at Northwestern Memorial removed what remained of my left hand in a surgery that lasted 4 hours and 17 minutes. Dr. Kapoor explained it to me beforehand, sitting beside my hospital bed with x-rays clipped to a light box on the wall. The images showed bones gone dark and dense, tissue compressed into masses that no longer resembled functional anatomy. The frostbite damage extends to the bone, she said, pointing to my radius and ulna with the end of her pen. We're seeing necrosis throughout the entire hand and into the wrist. There's no viable tissue to save. I stared at the x-rays. My hand didn't look human in those images, just shadows and white shapes that meant nothing. We'll amputate here. She indicated a line across my forearm, about 4 inches below the elbow. That should give us clean margins and preserve enough length for a functional prosthetic fitting. 4 inches below the elbow. I tried to picture it, tried to visualize my arm ending at that point, but my brain wouldn't cooperate. Kept filling in the rest. Kept seeing the hand that should be there. How long was I exposed? I asked. Dr. Kapoor glanced at her tablet. According to the report, you were unconscious for approximately 3 minutes before the response team reached you, but the tissue damage suggests exposure to extreme cold for no more than 5 to 8 seconds. 5 to 8 seconds. Long enough to destroy my hand completely. Long enough to freeze tissue solid all the way to the bone. What temperature would cause this? She shook her head. I've consulted with colleagues who specialize in cold injury. No one has seen damage this severe from such brief exposure. The closest comparisons are cases of prolonged immersion in liquid nitrogen, but even those don't match the pattern we're seeing here. Because it wasn't liquid nitrogen, I thought. It was something else, something that pulled heat out of matter fast enough to stop molecular motion. The surgery happened the next morning. They put me under at 6:45, and I woke up at 11:03 with my left arm ending in bandages and phantom sensations of fingers that no longer existed. Pierce visited me on the second day. She came alone, without identification or equipment case, wearing civilian clothes instead of the professional outfit she'd had on in the monitoring station. Jeans and a sweater, almost unrecognizable. She stood at the foot of my hospital bed for a moment, without speaking, looking at the bandaged stump where my forearm ended. "The monitoring equipment you placed worked perfectly," she said finally. "We got everything we needed." I didn't respond, just watched her face, looking for some reaction. Guilt, maybe. Remorse. Something to indicate she understood what the mission had cost. Her expression stayed neutral. Professional. The FAA implemented containment protocols at O'Hare starting at 0400 the morning after your incident. Terminal 2 remains closed. The manifestations have been addressed. How? That's classified. I laughed. Couldn't help it. The sound came out bitter and sharp. Classified. Right. Pierce moved to the chair beside my bed and sat down. The situation is resolved. O'Hare will return to normal operations within the week. That's what matters. What matters is you sent me into that terminal knowing what could happen. I gestured at my bandaged arm with my right hand. You showed me those photographs. Denver, Atlanta. People dying from internal frostbite. But you didn't mention what happens when you actually touch one of those things. I didn't know. Her voice stayed level. The previous incidents involved passive exposure, passengers walking through manifestations. We had no data on direct physical contact. Well, now you do. I leaned back against the pillows, suddenly exhausted. You're welcome. Pierce pulled a tablet from her bag and set it on the bedside table. This contains the data we collected from the portable monitors and from the equipment you were wearing. I thought you'd want to see it. I stared at the tablet. Part of me wanted to grab it immediately, to understand what had happened in those seconds at gate F3. The other part wanted to throw it across the room. "The woman I saw," I said. "At F3. Who was she?" "We don't know. The manifestations don't retain individual identity, just emotional impressions and general physical form. She could have been any of thousands of people who experienced intense grief at that location over the past 78 years. Thousands of people. All their grief and desperation concentrated into one figure with void, dark eyes and a silent scream. I closed my eyes. "Get out!" Pierce stood. "Someone from my department will contact you for debriefing once you're discharged. Until then, don't discuss what happened with anyone. Standard confidentiality protocols apply." She left without saying goodbye. The tablet remained on my bedside table, screen dark, full of data I wasn't ready to examine. The debriefing sessions started 3 days after my discharge, conducted in a windowless office in a building on West Adams Street that had no identifying signage anywhere. 3 people interviewed me, 2 men and 1 woman, all wearing dark suits, all introducing themselves with first names only. Marcus, Jennifer, David. They recorded everything on devices that looked nothing like standard recording equipment. They asked about the manifestations. Every detail I could remember. Thermal signatures, movement patterns, temperature drops, electromagnetic readings. The timeline of events from the first figure at F8 through the mission to place monitoring equipment. I answered their questions. Described what I'd seen on the monitors, what the thermal scanner on my wrist had shown me, the frost-covered corridors and impossible cold. When I described the woman at F3, her face appearing inches from mine, the absolute zero cold, the moment my vision whited out, Jennifer leaned forward. "Did she speak to you?" "No." Her mouth was open, but there was no sound. "Did you experience any auditory phenomena at all? Whispers, static, white noise?" I shook my head. Nothing. Just Pierce's voice through the earpiece. Marcus typed notes on his tablet. And the physical contact lasted approximately how long? I don't know. Seconds. Maybe 5. Maybe less. I flexed my right hand, the only one I had left. Long enough. They asked the same questions multiple ways, circling back to details I'd already provided, looking for inconsistencies or new information. The sessions lasted 2 hours each, conducted every other day for 3 weeks. I asked my own questions. How did they contain the situation? What happened to the manifestations? Were there still thermal signatures at O'Hare? Would this happen again? They gave me nothing. Standard responses about classified information and ongoing investigations and need-to-know protocols. On the final day, David handed me a document to sign. Non-disclosure agreement with legal language dense enough to require 20 minutes of reading. I signed it. What choice did I have? The situation at O'Hare has been fully resolved, he said as I returned the signed pages. You won't see any further manifestations on your monitoring systems when you return to work. If I return to work. Jennifer glanced at Marcus, then back to me. Your position remains available. Your supervisor has been informed you're on medical leave pending recovery. Torres. I hadn't heard from him since the night I'd called about the first thermal signature at F8. Hadn't seen him at the hospital or received any messages. What did you tell him? That you sustained an injury during authorized equipment inspection operations. Nothing more. Authorized equipment inspection operations. The official story that would go in my file. That would explain the missing forearm without mentioning manifestations or threshold density or women with void dark eyes. I stood. The prosthetic they'd fitted me with still felt foreign, the weight distribution wrong, the harness straps cutting into my shoulder. Are we finished? Yes. David collected his tablet and recording equipment. Thank you for your cooperation. They left first, disappearing through the door into whatever corridor lay beyond. I sat alone in the windowless office for 5 minutes afterward, staring at the blank walls, trying to reconcile everything I'd experienced with the absolute nothing they'd given me in return. Home was a 1-bedroom apartment in Portage Park, 3rd floor of a building that had been old when I moved in 11 years ago. I climbed the stairs slowly, still getting used to my balance with the prosthetic, and unlocked the door with my right hand. Everything inside looked exactly as I'd left it the night I'd gone to work, and found that first thermal signature. Coffee mug in the sink, jacket on the chair, bedroom door half open. I set my keys on the counter and stood in the kitchen, looking at the familiar space. Nothing had changed. The apartment didn't know what had happened. Didn't care that I'd lost my hand or seen things that violated every principle of physics I'd spent 11 years relying on. The phantom pain hit hard. Sharp sensation in fingers that didn't exist anymore. Nerves firing signals for tissue that had been removed and incinerated as medical waste. Dr. Kapoor had warned me about this. Explained how the brain maintains maps of the body even after parts are gone. How those maps keep sending and receiving signals that have nowhere to go. I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the prosthetic. Black plastic and metal components, functional, but lifeless. Not a hand, just a tool shaped vaguely like one. The tablet Pierce had left at the hospital was in my bag. I'd brought it home without looking at it, without examining any of the data it contained. Part of me wanted to understand what had happened at F3. What that woman had been. Why her touch had caused damage so severe it required amputation. What the monitoring equipment had captured in those seconds. The other part knew it wouldn't help. Wouldn't change anything. Wouldn't restore what I'd lost or explain why a brief exposure to something impossible had destroyed my hand while officials in dark suits told me nothing and filed it under authorized equipment inspection operations. I pulled the tablet out and set it on the table, pressed the power button. The screen lit up, showing a login prompt with a temporary password Pierce had written on a slip of paper taped to the back. My right hand hovered over the keyboard. Outside, traffic moved on Milwaukee Avenue. Distant sirens. The building's radiator clanked and hissed. Normal sounds. Normal world. Everything continuing exactly as it had before I'd seen thermal signatures that shouldn't exist, and touched something cold enough to stop molecules from moving. I typed in the password and opened the first file. The data would tell me something. Maybe not everything. Maybe not enough. But it was more than the nothing I'd gotten from Marcus and Jennifer and David in that windowless office. I started reading, trying to make sense of what had happened to me, trying to understand why 5 seconds of contact with an echo of someone else's grief had cost me my hand. The phantom pain continued, sharp and insistent, firing from fingers that existed only in my brain's stubborn map of a body that no longer matched reality. Every night since the incident, I wake at 3:47. Not 3:45, not 3:50. 3:47 exactly. The same minute I first saw the orange figure walk through the jetway door at gate F8 on my thermal monitors. The same minute reality broken away I still can't fix. My eyes open in the darkness of my bedroom. No gradual surfacing from sleep, no disorientation about the time, just instant consciousness at the precise moment when everything changed. My remaining fingers are numb. I lie still on my back, staring at the ceiling I can't see in the dark. My right hand rests on my chest, rising and falling with my breathing. My left arm, what's left of it, lies along my side. The amputation ended 4 inches below my elbow. Dr. Kapoor said they took everything they had to take, all the tissue that turned black when the woman at F3 reached for my face. But the numbness isn't in the missing part. It's in my right hand, the one that still has all 5 fingers, the one that never touched anything at Terminal 2 except Pierce's equipment case and the monitoring devices I placed at 3 locations before I lost consciousness. I flex my fingers in the darkness. They move. I can see the motion even though I can't feel it. Tendons shifting under skin, joints bending in sequence. But there's no sensation, no pressure from the sheet beneath my palm, no warmth from my own body heat, just absence where feeling should be. Cold absence. The same cold I felt in the F14-F16 corridor when 5 manifestations clustered around me while I placed the second monitoring device. The same cold that dropped the temperature at F8 to 35 degrees and left frost climbing the window glass. I know what this means. The echoes at O'Hare remember my face. Pierce said they were just impressions, emotional recordings without individual identity or consciousness. But the woman at F3 looked directly at me. Her eyes, those dark voids where eyes should be, focused on my face with recognition, with intention. She reached for me specifically, not randomly. She chose, and now every night at 3:47, I wake with numb fingers. I wonder when they'll find where I sleep. My apartment is on the 3rd floor of a brick building in Portage Park, 17.3 miles from Terminal 2. I measured it once on a map after I got home from the hospital, like distance might matter. Like enough space between me and O'Hare could break whatever connection formed when I made direct visual contact with a manifestation. But threshold density doesn't care about distance. Pierce said intense emotions wear reality thin in specific locations, creating spaces where echoes can exist. She said airports are vulnerable because of the concentration. 83 million passengers at O'Hare since 1945. All experiencing grief and terror and desperation in the same gates and corridors. She didn't say what happens when someone like me sees them directly, when observation becomes interaction, when the feedback loop she warned about completes in both directions. I lie awake in the darkness, feeling the cold creep into my bones. It happens at exactly 3:47, the same moment every night. The numbness in my fingers, yes, but also something deeper. Something that starts in my chest and spreads outward through my ribs and into my shoulders. Not pain, not even discomfort. Just cold settling into the spaces between my organs, filling my lungs with each breath, slowing my heartbeat to match some rhythm I don't recognize. The precise moment when I first saw the figure walk through the jetway door. I understand now that my encounter with the echoes created a connection that didn't end when I left Terminal 2. Pierce's tablet is still on my kitchen counter. I've read every file she left me, the manifestation density readings from all 3 monitoring devices, the electromagnetic spectrum analysis across 7 wavelengths, the temperature data showing cold spots that never recovered. Gate F8 stayed at 41 degrees for 6 days after they implemented containment protocols. The F14, F16 corridor dropped to 23 degrees and froze the pipes in the walls. But none of the files explain what happened at F3 when the woman appeared inches from my face. None of the data covers direct contact, visual recognition, intentional touch, because I was the first. The cold in my chest reaches my throat. I swallow against it, feeling frost I know isn't physically there, but exists anyway. My breath doesn't fog in the darkness of my bedroom. The temperature is normal, 70 degrees like always. But I feel the cold regardless, spreading through my body in waves that pulse with my heartbeat. The connection works both ways now. I saw them. They saw me. And at 3:47 every morning, the threshold between their world and mine thins enough for the cold to cross over. The numbness spreads a little further up my hand each night. Tonight it reaches past my knuckles to my palm. Yesterday it stopped at my second finger joints. The night before that, just my fingertips. I've been tracking the progression in my head, measuring the distance the way I used to measure temperature gradients on my monitoring equipment. Consistent incremental movement, approximately 0.3 inches per night, advancing up my hand toward my wrist. At this rate, the numbness will reach my elbow in 11 days. Then my shoulder, then my chest, then my heart. I don't know what happens when the cold reaches that far. Maybe nothing. Maybe I'll just wake at 3:47 with a numb torso, then a numb body, then complete absence of sensation while my brain keeps working and my eyes keep seeing, but I can't feel anything at all. Or maybe the progression will complete. Maybe when the cold finally spreads far enough, I'll become what the woman at F3 was. An echo, an impression, a thermal signature visible only on monitoring equipment while I walk through walls and stand motionless in waiting areas, creating cold spots that never warm up. I flex my numb fingers again. Still no feeling, just visual confirmation of movement. Tendons and joints doing what they're designed to do without any sensory feedback. My left arm, the amputated one, burns with phantom pain. The missing fingers ache the way they always do, nerve endings firing signals for tissue that doesn't exist anymore. But tonight, the pain is sharper, more insistent. All 3 missing fingers throb in sequence. Index, middle, ring. The ones I lost 4 years ago during a sensor repair when the heating element failed and I was too focused on the calibration to notice my hand going numb until it was too late. Those fingers know about cold, about what happens when temperature drops low enough to stop blood flow, to freeze cells, to kill tissue at the molecular level. They're trying to warn me. I sit up in bed. The phantom pain intensifies, all 3 missing fingers screaming now. My right hand, still numb, grips the edge of my mattress. I can see my fingers pressing into the fabric but can't feel the texture or the resistance. The cold in my chest pulses once, hard like a second heartbeat. I know something is coming, not tomorrow or next week, soon. Maybe tonight. Maybe in 3 days when the numbness reaches my wrist. Maybe in 11 days when it reaches my elbow. But coming regardless, moving toward me with the same steady progression the echoes showed at O'Hare, walking through locked doors, standing motionless in waiting areas, becoming more solid with each hour of observation until they could reach out and touch. The echoes haven't forgotten me. I'm sure of that now. The woman at F3 saw my face, looked directly at me with those void dark eyes, and reached for me with intention. She marked me somehow, created a connection that survived Pierce's containment protocols and Terminal 2's closure and 17.3 miles of distance between O'Hare and my apartment. Every morning at 3:47, that connection activates. The threshold between their world and mine thins for just a moment, long enough for the cold to cross over, long enough for the numbness to spread a little further, long enough for me to feel what they feel, long enough for them to find me. I stand up. My legs work normally, no numbness below my waist yet. The phantom pain in my missing fingers continues, sharp pulses that follow my heartbeat. My right hand hangs at my side, numb and useless. My bedroom window faces east toward O'Hare. I can't see the airport from here. Too many buildings in between. Too much distance. But I know the direction. I've known it for 11 years, the same way I knew the layout of Terminal 2 without looking at maps, the same way I could identify which gate had a thermal anomaly just from the temperature gradient. I walk to the window, press my numb right palm against the glass. Can't feel the cold surface, can't feel anything. But I can see, in the reflection, a faint orange glow around my hand. The same orange that thermal signatures show on monitoring equipment. The same color the echoes appeared on my screens for 4 nights before I entered Terminal 2 and made direct contact. The threshold between their world and mine continues to thin. Not just at 3:47, not just in my bedroom. Everywhere I go, everything I touch. The connection works both ways now. I saw them, they saw me, and the observation feedback loop Pierce warned about is completing in reverse. They're not just echoes anymore, and I'm not entirely human. The orange glow around my hand fades as I step back from the window. My phantom fingers scream one final warning, then fall silent. The cold in my chest settles into a steady presence, waiting. 3:51 a.m. 4 minutes past the threshold moment. I return to bed but don't lie down. Just sit on the edge of the mattress, my numb right hand in my lap, my missing left hand aching with memory. Tomorrow night I'll wake at 3:47 again. The numbness will spread another 0.3 inches up my hand. The cold will settle into my bones for 4 minutes, maybe 5. And eventually the echoes will find where I sleep. I'm sure of it. The only question is what happens when they arrive.